A 2011 Ofcom survey indicated that 33% of those between 12 and 15 years of age speak to friends of friends or people that they don't know online. Unfortunately, gentlemen, when we talk about the words risk management, we almost fall asleep instantly, don't we? But this needs to be discussed. So perhaps I could just ask an initial question. What can teachers and parents do to improve the children's understandings of the risks? Who'd like to start with that?
I think it's talk to them. The fundamental part of parenting and risk management has got to be talking to them. Out of the Byron review, Tanya Byron talked about the real concern that children were being taken away from risk. You don't go and play outdoors anymore, you go and play indoors, you play on the computer in your bedroom because it's safe. I think there's a dialogue that needs to happen both at home between parents and their children, and also in school. The technology changes so rapidly. You need to talk to the children and have an ongoing discussion with them about what are you doing, what app have you got on your phone, what's it do? As a pastoral program, as a tutor program, because the tutors spend seeing the children every day, because they will pick up the changes that happen. And when I go into schools and talk to assembly halls full of children, I'm constantly changing my presentation time after time as I pick up the changes in the way that children are using the technology. And I think we come back to this thing about dialogue and about parenting. You need to talk to your child as a parent, and as schools we need to have that dialogue with the children about how they use technology and not be afraid to appear to be behind the curve, but be happy to take advice from the children about what works and what doesn't.
Okay. Yeah, often children come up with new little things before we see them, don't they? So at the moment on phones and mobile devices, you're being asked to switch on location functionality, aren't you? Do you think teachers and parents understand the difference between just specific sites and the general idea behind some of these services?
Well, it's quite rigorous settings being able to do that, so you couldn't do that just without knowing. And so I think if you went through the process of setting one of those geolocation things up, you'd be surprised how rigorous that is. But I can understand why there are concerns around that. I think you sort of have to bring it back to the start, really, because the other aspect to this is the nature of parenting and of families is changing dramatically. Typically both parents are working, people are very time poor. So the role of education in terms of IT and of computer literacy is probably more important than it's ever been. Yeah. There are families who can't afford a PC, who can't afford a flash smartphone. In fact, that's probably the majority in the latter case. And so therefore, schools are probably one of the first places where children get universal access to something on equal terms. And so the Charter of Institute IT's e-safety qualification is really important in that area, because I think within a certain age band it allows children to come in and access the technology all at the same level. And I think that's really important, and I think that engagement is key. We're seeing in other countries around the world those sorts of things appearing even in preschool situations where the child grows into the technology and the responsibilities. In Luxembourg right now they have something called a digital passport, and the child has to earn a series of responsibility points to secure that passport, and that gives them discounts to youth clubs and actually adds to their vocational qualifications later on in life. So there are lots of things emerging around the world like that, and I think the Chartered Institute of IT's work in this area and having independently validated qualifications is a really important step, not just for children but for parents. And I think that's really key.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I think teachers and parents need to understand the risks more fully themselves, but also the positives to it. I think we need to take the fear factor out of things. I can say anecdotally that one predator online can be highly impactful on the lives of many children, and I'm not downplaying that at all. The risk is out there, but I think we need to look at some of the positives. We need to make the parents understand the positives and understand the risks, and teachers as well. And if we can do this through a professional qualification, then that's fantastic. But it's all about, actually, I think, as well as the children understand it, is educating the educators and the parents.
I would agree with that. I think we need to think of sometimes the language that we use. And the audience that we're using that language with. For example, using terms like risk management to young people. One, do they understand what risk management means? And I don't mean that to sound condescending, but there are various takes on that term. And two, I think it has negative connotations in some circumstances, and has connotations of this kind of fear culture as well. And I think actually what we're trying to do with e-safety initiatives across a variety of organisations is actually enrich the online experience rather than build a culture of fear. And I think that's one of the ways that we can sort of truly enable the information society. It's not just about using the tools, it's about how the tools are used and how that enriches people's lives, as well as, obviously, protecting themselves and taking into consideration security risks and so on and so forth.
Do we really feel it is a culture of fear? I mean, when you taught the Green Cross Code as a child, and we had Tufty Club when we were at school, which brought it home with a cute little fairy animal. We weren't told that we weren't allowed to cross the road, were we? We were still allowed out. We just had to remember what the risks were. Do you think the message is actually the other way around with virtual and online things, that we're saying it's all terrible, and rather than you can still cross the road and do things?
I think it's changing. I think you go back 4 or 5 years, it was very much about fear. And I think that still is there for the adults. I think the children have moved on, and they are using it very much for their own benefit. And you look at, to see or to hear year 5 and year 6 and 9, 10-year-olds talking about going home and going on to Moshi Monsters or Bin Weevils to talk to their friends for, at 5 o'clock, we're going to be there for an hour. They see no fear at all in it. It's about the social element of it. There is a fear from some of the parents from what they read, and particularly around Facebook. And there are a lot of parents who say, should I let my child on Facebook? They're 12, 13 years old. I'm not sure I want to. An adult saying, I've been invited into Google+, do I want to? And my comment is, well, go and experiment. It's what the children do, but understand the risks when you go in. And I think that's what we need to at least provide children with, is talk to us about what you're doing. We can give you some advice. They're going to go and play with it anyway, but to try and help them understand.
So we've talked about the students to some extent, we've talked about teachers. Are we doing enough for parents to help them to keep up to date with what's going on?
No, we're not. And I think actually this is where the responsibility comes across the board that we started off with. I don't think it's just up to schools to engage parents. I think the police could be more ably involved, proactively actually talking about safety online. I certainly think parents' societies, associations, I think governors should be more involved. Governors who are often parents, and generally parents, charities and organisations such as the Grid and others here today need to push that agenda with parents. I think they do. I think they're a very crucial part of it. It's still my belief, and I don't know whether you guys agree with me or not, that it is the child that we need to educate the most. It is those, as I said, that are flying the plane. If we start with them at a very early age to make them digitally media literate and understand risk, maybe put it in another word, but understand risk, then that's the main core. But as a second arm of that, then parents, I think, are very crucial, especially as the point you made, Dave, with the mobile environment, where actually they're taking this stuff home. And how many parents actually ask when they buy a smartphone for their child, the company they're buying it from, to apply the filters? They don't think further. So, a crucial second barrier, if you like, are parents. And as organisations, we should be pushing to get those parents better and better educated.
In FOSI, we often talk about really children need to have the rules, the tools and the resilience to be able to work in that online safety world. And emphasis particularly on resilience. And parents have an obligation to sort the rules and tools out. Okay? And that enables the child to learn how to develop resilience, to look at a website and say, can I trust that content? And all those kind of things. And schools have a very important role in directing children towards sites that are of quality and of a high standing and can be trusted. So that resilience can be built over time, and children have the time to do that. I think what's very encouraging is there's a lot of evidence to indicate that the level of literacy in parents and teachers is rising quite quickly. I think a few years back it lagged. I think social media in particular has changed a lot of that. Some of the fastest age groups in terms of social networking around the world are 35 plus.
Right.
And there's a lot of evidence, particularly in Asia, that more than half of those people that come to social media, not just Facebook, others as well, have never used computers before. So we're seeing a generational change. And so I think there's grounds to be really optimistic that actually parents and teachers will catch up, not just in the UK and beyond, and that they will be better equipped. And in fact, you know, one of the major growth areas is 65 plus. At one time that was inconceivable, but we hear about terms of silver surfing and things like that. So, you know, I think the playing field is levelling somewhat, and I think we've gone through a very difficult period in the last few years, and I think we can look forward to a much more even-handed perspective in terms of the way people use technology.
I would just add to that saying, you know, there are a wealth of good resources out there provided by organisations represented here today, but obviously a wide variety of organisations provide guidance materials aimed at, you know, supporting parents or aimed at supporting teachers and so on and so forth. And I think that's a key role that organisations, again represented here today, can play, is in signposting teachers and parents towards those materials and towards opportunities to develop that understanding within young people.
And we see that role changing as well. I mean, within the EU, the GRID are partnering with ChildNet and the IWF are the UK Safer Internet Centre, and we've now got an online professionals helpline for professionals actually working with children who don't maybe get to grips with the technology as quickly as they can, where they can now come and get some resource and some help. And you're right, Jeremy, there's tons of really useful resource out there already.